Yo, what up, fam? Man, I had to bring out literally the maker's mark on this one. I'm not joking. I had to bring it out. Let me tell you why. Mm. I just had a long conversation with R.J. Bonds. Now, R.J. Bonds is a Tupac investigator, and by that I mean someone that has taken the last 10 years and looked into the allegations of who killed Tupac and all of that. And if you look him up, I mean, he's all over online. But I had a long conversation. I asked many questions that I had and a lot of you had. So we went deep into what happened, who killed Tupac. He named names. I really pin him down into being specific, like who and why. Also, we talk a little bit about Frank Alexander and the whole weird investigation behind his death of apparent suicide. Who he used to be Tupac's bodyguard. Who else did we talk about? I mean, we talked about a lot of people. We talked about the Las Vegas Police Department, about the LAPD, Bernard Parks. I mean, see, when I started this, I was a fan, just being nosy and seeing is Tupac alive, and then I started seeing all this evidence, and I'm like, man, Tupac is alive, but then as a lot of you and people like R.J. Bonds and Michael Carlin, as I get a lot more information, then I can understand a lot of the conspiracy and why some people don't want the truth to be known about what really happened to Tupac. And you just got to listen to this interview. So make sure you get you something to sip on or do what you need to do to relax. You're gonna be here a while. It's a long interview, but stay to the end. I mean, a lot of things get revealed, and I'm still just in shock of some of the things that he talked about. And I don't know. Some of you, leave me your comments. Let me know how you guys feel about what he was saying. If you guys have any information, let me know, because what I'm doing is I'm like you guys, and I'm just getting all this information, and I'm trying to put the pieces together, and we can do that better if we do it together. So let me know what you guys find out. Let me know in the comments. Make sure you subscribe. Some other very, very revealing, interesting interviews coming up, and we're gonna keep moving. Tupac is alive, regardless of how you want to take that. He is alive. He will continue to be alive. But we're gonna get to the bottom of what really happened. And we all miss him, so let's listen up to the interview. Let's see what check it out. Check out what he had to say. Hey, welcome to the Q Reyes Project. This is Q Reyes coming at you once again. And man, I've been learning so much. When I first started this whole journey, I was really one of those fans just trying to figure out why so many conspiracies out there about Tupac. And first, is he alive? Is he not? And this Casanova, the Don, and all these things. But now I'm getting into some really deep things that I think make a lot of sense, and to kind of help me sort through a lot of this information out here. I have R.J. Bonds, which is definitely someone that's an expert in these conspiracies regarding Tupac and even Biggie. So, R.J., how are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for giving me a call.
Yeah, man, I'm definitely, and actually the reason that I found you, a lot of the fans of the channel were saying, that you're the person to talk to, that you have a lot of information that needs to be put out there and promoted. So first of all, before all of that, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what is it that you do?
Well, sure. My name is Richard Bond. Everybody calls me RJ. That's the R in RJ Bond. I've been doing Tupac documentaries since 2006, actually. So we're at 10 years now that we've been at it. And I started working on the first documentary, which was Tupac Assassination, which actually came out in 2007. We followed that up with a sequel. I got done cutting a Digital Underground documentary, which had Pac in it, and a documentary that hasn't come out yet called Tupac: The Early Years. And that was produced by Tupac's manager, Adrian Gregory. So I've been kind of in the Tupac business. So then there's the book. I wrote the book with Mike Carlin, Tupac 187. So there's a lot of time in the world of Tupac, I guess you would say, over the past 10 years.
Definitely sounds like it. I mean, it's amazing the trajectory, the amount of work that you have out there, especially about Tupac. So, expanding on that, how did you, get interested in the Tupac subject?
Well, my best friend for almost 20 years, and may he rest in peace, was godfather of my son, was Frank Alexander. And I met Frank right shortly after the time that the shooting happened in Las Vegas. And I met Frank through a mutual friend. And I guess this happens with certain personalities. We just hit it off. And it wasn't anything Tupac related at the time. In fact, all of that was kind of a side story, is what he did before I ever met him. So it wasn't like I met him as Tupac's bodyguard. I met him as Frank, the guy who worked personal security for different, celebrities and artists and all that. And that was really kind of where it started, because it was through Frank and the introduction into Frank's world that I got involved in the Tupac world, and of course with the shootings. Frank was always a tortured soul. He really had some deep regrets about the way that things happened that night. Not that anybody could have changed it, but at the same time, his role was as a bodyguard to protect the person he's charged with taking care of, and through one reason or another, he just wasn't able to do that. So as time went by, we talked more about what happened that night, and then many years went by. And at one point, he talked about doing a version of his movie Before I Wake and adding a bunch of, new information that had come in about the shootings. And it was my recommendation that we go ahead and just do a whole new movie about it. And the funny thing about it was that the original movie was actually not going to be about the shootings at all, or the murder investigation at all. It was going to be a movie about how the rap music industry had changed since the deaths of Tupac and Biggie. Because, as you know, that was kind of like the end of the era of hip-hop. I mean, really, the hard rap, that kind of died with those guys. And it became much more mainstream. And
oh, yeah, soft. It softened up.
Yeah, and it gave rise to a lot of people who arguably don't deserve the title of rapper. That's why they kind of made it hip-hop. A little more easy to digest, a little more mainstream. So that was what we were going to do the documentary on, because I found that was a very interesting subject. Frank knew a lot of the old bodyguards that were working with other celebrities in the industry. And so we started interviewing the bodyguards who took care of these celebrities, because the next step was going to be to interview the actual celebrities themselves about, and how they thought the music industry changed. So as we were talking to these bodyguards and people that Frank knew, a lot of them he knew through Death Row Records that were former affiliates of his. And as we began to talk to these guys, a lot of the same information, one thing just bubbled to the top, and that was Vegas police had never talked to any of them about the shooting on September 6th. They just never even interviewed them or anything. And so one day I just sat down with Frank. I said, Frank, I think this is where the story's at. I kind of wonder why, after all this time, these people haven't been talked to. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So we agreed, and that's actually when the assassination movie took on its whole life, and the rest is history.
Wow. Well, and I've been to get this out of the way, because I think that a lot of people out there are kind of confused on the conspiracy. In your opinion, is Tupac alive or is he dead?
Well, based on everything I know after talking to his mom and his aunt and Frank and Gloria was his aunt, I'm sorry, Tracy Robinson, Lewis Steinberg, talking to everybody who was around at that time, I think Pac's better than Julius Caesar.
Okay, because I think the confusion out there is something fishy about the entire life and death of Tupac, obviously, but I think people are sort of confused on the being alive and death, and I think it has a lot to do with some people might be fueling the conspiracy in the wrong direction, or directing it in the wrong direction, so that we don't get to the bottom of these real facts and questions. Do you agree with that, or how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that obfuscation, which is kind of the clouding of an event, to convict somebody of murder or to convict them of a killing, you have to have a standard that's called beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the standard. It's not probable cause. It's not maybe he did, or maybe we can convince a jury he did. It's really proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So if there's a reasonable doubt, even a single reasonable doubt, there's an impossibility that you can convict somebody. And it actually got so bad that I was talking to Brett Becker, who was the Las Vegas Metro Police investigator. He's one of the lead investigators on the Shakur shooting. We were driving around in his car, and he said point blank to me, he said, somebody could actually walk into the police station with the gun, set the gun down on the counter, and confess to the killings, and that doesn't mean that we would have a conviction out of it, because there's been so much doubt and so much cloudiness about the case. And of course, what's the first thing you need to have if you're going to convict somebody of murder? And that's, you got to have a murder. Somebody's got to be dead. So saying that Tupac's alive and keeping that out there really helps everybody to derail the whole dead thing, because corpus delicti, you've got to have a body. So, that's one really good way to cloud things up. Just keep that out there.
So regarding the body, for example, one of the things that keeps this he's alive or dead conspiracy alive is that, Suge Knight, for example, stated that he paid someone $3 million to cremate the body. And now, the autopsy, there's a lot of discrepancies within that as well. And also, without the body to investigate, really, then there is no evidence. Like you're saying, it's a hard case. How did do you know anything about the cremation? Was he cremated? Was he buried? What happened with the body?
Well, yeah, he was actually cremated very quickly after he was pronounced dead. They wheeled him out the back of the hospital, and they sent him straight over to the crematorium and had him cremated. There's a couple of reasons that I've heard from the family, and a couple of reasons that have been explained to me why that happened. I can't speak to Suge's claim that he spent $3 million, because I've never heard of anybody being cremated for $3 million. That seems I think it's about $15,000 to get somebody cremated.
Yeah, that's a good business. I'm gonna get into the cremation business. That sounds
exactly. Yeah, that's a hell of a profit. Straight up. Yeah. So I can't speak to that, but I can. Of course, Suge. That's just Suge. He's flamboyant. He blows everything up. But I do know that he was actually cremated, and Rich McCauley, who was an off-duty Los Angeles police officer that was working that night for Death Row Records, was one of the people that was paid to go to the mortuary and to drop the body off to get cremated. Now, a lot of people get a lot of antsy kind of conspiracy theories about the cremation and why it happened. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, a lot of times it's really budgetary. You cremate somebody and you cremate them quickly because it actually costs a lot of money to keep a body hanging around. When you embalm them, they've got to store them, put them in a refrigerator. I mean, I know this sounds very morbid to talk about, but it really is the ugly truth about death, because the very same thing kind of happened with Frank Alexander. When Frank died, once they got the autopsy done on him and that was done, they cremated Frank very quickly afterwards, because that was Frank's wishes that he be cremated.
Yeah, but with Tupac, though, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't think there will be a money issue as far as maybe keeping his body for a while longer, right?
Well, that's another one that I think the public really gets really confused about and it misstates. Let's take a step back for a minute and remember that Tupac was with Death Row for about 9 months. Okay, wasn't a long period of time. When it comes to royalties, and by the way, that's if Suge is going to pay you, which he had a notorious reputation for not paying people. If you were going to get paid, everybody was legitimate and on the level. It could take, and I know this because of the royalties on the DVDs that we've made, it's no different. It can take 6 to 9 months to actually get paid for something after you release it. It just takes that long for the merchants to pay the distributor and the distributor to count it up and deduct the cost, then pay you. It's a very long cycle. And while it can be argued that Tupac's money, if Tupac had money, there's another argument that Death Row was actually plowing through Tupac's money pretty darn quick. And none of it, at the end of the day, I said all that to say this, none of it was really getting to Afeni or getting to the family. They were living in a rented house. They were living on, borrowed furniture and rented furniture. They didn't own anything. And Tupac's family, after speaking with his Aunt Glo, they weren't people that lived on, they didn't have a lot of money. Let's just be honest. And Death Row wasn't giving them money. That was not the case at all. So even though there was some money, millions of dollars hanging out there in the stratosphere somewhere, the connection to the family who had to actually sign and pay the bill didn't happen. And whether or not Suge ended up stepping up and paying the $15,000 or paying for whatever money it was clearly a decision that was born out of budget that they just didn't feel the need or just want to have the body around. I mean, it's a horrible thing to have an open casket viewing, and if you're having trouble dealing with the death to begin with, and my God, that was a traumatic death. If you're having trouble dealing with that, you're probably going to want to move forward through it as quickly as you can, because that's like the difference between a clean cut and a fractured cut. It's much more painful and then easier if you just cut it clean.
But then,
probably the simplest explanation.
Then that's the monetary part. Then how about the legal part of when there's a murder or a body that is the cause of a crime? Doesn't the state go into the investigation about with the autopsy and all of that before the cremation? Because if it was cremated so quick, how can they do the proper autopsy, cremating the body so quick? I mean, what? No, I mean that's my question. It's like there's a certain a quickness that where other bodies that maybe are not as famous or as controversial are kept longer. His was almost like a rush job, It was, and even like I said, I'll go back to Frank Alexander's death. The autopsy of Frank's death took almost a week to get done. And I don't have any reason or a rhyme as to why that was. But an autopsy itself, the actual act of the autopsy or the coroner actually going in and doing the autopsy, it's about 4 hours, give or take. I mean, that's just what it takes them to get done to do what they need to do. Measure the brain and weigh it and do all those things that they need to do to fill out their coroner's report. So if they've got nothing else to do, they can get through it pretty darn quick. It's really a question of whether or not they have other things to do. And then the other sad part about it is we don't know what the backup was like at that morgue at that time, because Vegas isn't necessarily the murder capital of the world, but I'm sure they get their fair share, as does Los Angeles or any other big city. They get their fair share of people that have to be autopsies that go through there. Not all of them, of course, are murder victims, but, anybody that dies is entitled to have some sort of an autopsy done. So the coroner's office in Vegas, they may just be like, Little Caesars. They, just pizza. They get these things done and spit them out. Tupac being no exception, because the coroner really doesn't care who that person is, especially in Vegas. I mean, they get, celebrities and everybody else in Vegas, so they're probably pretty jaded to that. And my guess, and I guess I am speculating here openly, my guess is that was part of the reason why there were so many flaws in the autopsy report, was because they were just running to get it done, and they were, pushing them off and getting ready for the next one. So, I mean, I know that that's not the explanation that fans want to hear, but it kind of makes a little bit of sense from a pragmatic standpoint. Okay, yeah, because I think, it's even if they are a little jaded, it's still Tupac. So it's even if they didn't really necessarily know who he was, I'm sure there was a certain level of especially if they're getting paid $3 million or whatever amount.
I will say this though, I want to tell you, it just jumped in my head. I had somebody tell me a few years back, and it was actually somebody that had kind of a counter position to ours. But he made a really good point, and I'll bring it forward. And it's about the fans and the whole Alive thing, and like you said, it is Tupac. You know, a lot of people have trouble believing, especially when they're fans, that for as big a personality as Tupac Shakur had, for as big of a guy as he was, and what he meant to so many people whose lives he touched, people he didn't even know, he was so big, bigger than life, that it's hard for people to accept that maybe the end of his life was very simple. That, you know, he should have gone out with a blaze of glory, something that would actually match the way he lived. You know, you go out, big, and you go out grand because that's how you lived and that's what people meant to you. John Lennon was a great example of that. You know, he was standing on his porch, he got 2 shots to his chest, and he dropped dead. And he was a Beatle. And a lot of people were really outraged about that because it's like, wow, that was so simple. But that's what it was. So I think as we look at the Alive series, I think there's a lot of that plays into it. People want to believe that he was able to overcome all the gunshot wounds and able to, for a second time, and able to get off to Cuba or wherever it is that they think he is and be alive, because they really want his end, whatever that might be, to be as big as he was as a person.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. And people are still going to dispute. People are going to believe whatever they want to believe, regardless of whether they're here or anywhere. But yeah, so jumping right into what it is, then who killed Tupac?
Well, that's a great question. I think that there's 2 big theories out there. I guess it's kind of boiled down like the Super Bowl, where you've got the two largest theories that are out there. And one of them evolves around the Orlando Anderson story that there was a guy that they beat up at the MGM and he got revenge and killed Tupac out of revenge. And then there's the other one that said that Death Row in some way or another, or people within Death Row, had something to do with the murder. So you've got those 2 camps. And for each one of those, there's probably 3 or 4 variations on that. There are 3 or 4 different colors of that, if you will. It's my belief, and the investigation that I've done over the years, I've done probably 50 interviews with family, friends, witnesses. I've reviewed 10,000 pages of documents, death row documents, police documents. I got Russ Poole's documents. They go all the way back to the beginning, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But after everything I've said and done, it's still my belief, the same way it was back at the beginning, that there were people involved with Death Row Records, inside of Death Row Records, that were responsible for the killing. If you believe a letter that was given to Michael and I by Chris Blatchford, who worked for Fox News, the trigger men themselves were guys by the name of Malcolm and Danny Patton. And there is conjecture in that letter that a rapper by the name of Little Half Dead, I think his name is Donald Smith, may have had some involvement there. Again, I didn't write the letter. This is just what the letter says. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that that's actually what it is. But that is the theory that's out there. But I do believe that Death Row Records and the people that work for Death Row Records were responsible for Tupac's death. Now, having said that,
well, wait 1 second. When you say, sorry to interrupt, but when you say the people that work for Death Row Records, would that include Suge Knight?
Well, that's what I was going to get at. Now, and I'm happy to copy this, because the one thing that we've never done, as you know, and if you're any kind of studied my material in my movies or any of the stuff I put out, even interviews we did during the screening of the movies, go on YouTube and watch those. I have never said, I have the answer, I solved it, I figured it out, it's my, you might as well walk away right now because I wrote the end of the movie, okay? I've never said that. You can't find one interview where I've said that. I say always, we get the information, as much information out there as we can. You be the judge. We're not here to push my opinion on you. I'm not like Greg Kading or other people run around saying, I figured it all out because I'm the smartest guy in the room. Okay, we put it out there and we say, look, you be the judge. I have my own personal beliefs, but what I believe isn't important. What you believe as the viewer and what you take away from the information we give you is what's important. And we could postulate a couple of theories, and you may agree with parts of it, and you may disagree with other parts. But at least it gets the conversation going, and we've never closed ourselves off to paint ourselves into a corner, okay? Would you agree with that? You've watched that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. You haven't really said, here's the solution, here's the smoking gun, per se.
Right, exactly. But in the assassination movies, and I will cop to this in a minute. In the assassination movies, originally we drew a dotted line to Suge Knight as being kind of in charge or rallying the troops to have Tupac Shakur killed because of his involvement with Tupac, leaving the label, and a lot of fights that happened the night before. There were a lot of pointers that indicated that Suge Knight could have been responsible for the shooting. Now, the one rumor we could never get around, not rumor, the one fact we could never get around in a million years, and it haunted the movies for a long time, was this notion that Suge was in the car. And there are many people that have said it, and I don't disagree, that it sounds ludicrous to say that the guy who would be planning to have somebody shot would also himself sit in the car while that shooting happened, knowing that it was going to happen, okay? It sounds crazy, and everybody goes, oh, that sounds crazy. But the truth of the matter is that's actually rooted in historical fact. There are several different cases historically where somebody has been killed and the person that orchestrated the killing was actually right next to them or right with them when it happened, and they were actually in harm's way. So is it crazy? No. But we put it out that far and said that, that Suge could have been responsible for it. He certainly had motive, but we just couldn't get around that one fact that Suge was in the car with Tupac. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So we put out the movies, and time went by, and a lot of people asked, why haven't you put out an Assassination 3 DVD? And we thought about it, and we started to get our stuff together, but ultimately what was bothering me is I didn't feel like there was much more story to tell until facts or something kind of presented itself that broke the case open, and there was a lot more information, to give. I don't want to tell the same story 5 times.
Yeah.
So I waited. I waited, and we didn't put anything out, didn't put anything out. Well, when we got to talking with Russ Poole shortly after Frank died, a little bit while he was still alive, but then mostly after Frank died, we started to talk to Russ Poole a lot more. I got involved with Russ. I started looking at the notes. I started looking at the things. And ultimately, it was an interview done by the Las Vegas police that I did with Brett Becker in the car while he was in uniform, on duty with the Las Vegas Police Department. And I want to put that out there because I don't want people like Shady K's crew to sit there and say that we don't talk to people and we don't do our due diligence. That dude never talked to Las Vegas police, and he said so himself. He never talked to us. We talked to Vegas police about the investigation. We talked to the lead detectives. I myself was in that car. And I'm going to tell you, when Brett Becker was talking about it, and I have it on tape, he started talking about how the shootings were different in the way that they would investigate them from a typical homicide investigation. And what he said was, and I quote, the CEO of a major corporation, the investigation of an attempted shooting or a murder of a CEO of a major corporation is handled one way. However, these people were in the music industry, so it's very difficult. They move around. It's very hard to contact witnesses. And that's what he told me. Well, 10 years ago when we talked to him, that didn't have a lot of weight because we were thinking in one direction about it. It really didn't register. But as we started to get deeper into Russ Poole's notes, and we started to look at the original investigation, then of course the much touted confession letter came through. We started to look at the fact that maybe Las Vegas police was actually telling us something, because they weren't talking about the killing of a rap superstar. They were talking about the attempted killing of the CEO of a major corporation. Well, that wasn't Tupac. So who are they talking about?
Yeah.
And so I started to think, well, maybe, just maybe, Vegas isn't really concluding. And of course, they won't say who they think did it, because they always say it's a closed investigation and blah, 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 or an ongoing investigation. But when he gave me that piece of information, I started to think, well, maybe that's how they're looking at it. Maybe they're not looking at Suge Knight as a suspect, but maybe as a victim. Okay? Well, that was actually confirmed in Suge Knight's interview, which we posted online. It's available online, the entire Las Vegas police interview of Suge Knight during that killing. And that interview, the Las Vegas police say, you are not a suspect. You're a victim. You are not a suspect. Well, suddenly those two things kind of go hand in hand, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
So as we started going through, we started looking at things a whole different way and saying, take Tupac out of it for a minute. What if the real hit was on Suge Knight? Instead of trying to figure out who had motive to kill Tupac, we said, well, who has motive to want to kill Suge Knight? And that changed the entire complexion of the case, because we started to really look at Tupac as a casualty of a bigger problem with Suge Knight, and actually Suge Knight being a target himself.
Wow. So Tupac was almost like a bystander, a casualty. Yes, it wasn't meant for him.
Right. The confession letter, in the patent confession letter, it does go into detail about that. Little Half Dead said that Tupac had stolen some demos and he got beat up over it, and there was a whole controversy, and he sounded like he had an axe to grind. And the letter makes it sound like, that Tupac could have also have been a target there. But regardless of whether or not Tupac was also a target or he was collateral damage, we really believe for sure that Suge Knight was actually the target. And so we're still trying to vet out a little bit as to whether or not there was equal motive to get Tupac at the same time, kind of a 2-for-1 deal, or whether or not, regardless of whether or not Tupac would have been in the car, they would have been, that Suge Knight still would have been a target. Now, having said that, the confession letter did drop Reggie Wright's name into the mix in 1998, which I didn't even know who Reggie Wright was until 2006. And the first time that I ever thought that Reggie Wright was involved with it at all, Frank Alexander actually kind of laughed about it, because he only saw Reggie as the head of the security company. He never saw him tied up business-wise or friendship-wise with Suge. So the fact that that confession letter mentioned Reggie Wright's name and actually said that Reggie Wright gave all of the locations of where they were going to be that weekend, it starts to make me believe that, he must have known that there was going to be a reason that Tupac was going to be in the car with Suge Knight. And so we started to probe even a little deeper into that. But that's kind of where it was left off, was that Suge was the target and Tupac was kind of either intentionally or unintentionally, he was collateral damage.
Okay, and why pick Las Vegas after a fight? To if you're gonna have a hit that's premeditated, why in one of the most traffic infected areas of the United States, in Las Vegas, after a fight? Like, why there, you think?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, Suge and Death Row Records and David Kenner were very, very, very comfortable with the mob attorneys that they had representing them in regular business dealings, like George Policis, like the name of the guy was a former U.S. attorney that represented Suge in some later things. They were all there in Vegas. So if you're going to do anything as a company against Suge Knight, or you're going to move against Suge Knight and you're David Kenner, or you're going to do anything at all. It's jurisdictional. It's what they call venue shopping. Let me take jurisdiction out of it for a minute. In court cases, there's a thing called venue shopping, and venue shopping means that I could file a case against somebody in this court, or I could file a case against somebody in that court. And how that's determined is whether the local laws are more favorable to me in my case versus this court, which might be a little tougher. So maybe I'll go sue somebody over in this court over here because the venue is friendlier. It works more to my advantage. Well, venue shopping can happen in a lot of different cases. And where somebody gets killed or where something can go down or something can happen, that's an option too, because you're doing it over state lines. So you immediately have jurisdictional problems, and that really started to show itself up when Las Vegas police and Compton PD started getting into it regarding who they thought was a suspect and who was really going to, investigate the case. So if you're David Kenner and you're a brilliant criminal attorney, you're already going to understand what jurisdictional problems are in venue shopping. You're going to understand, well, if I do it over here versus over there, it adds a whole layer of confusion or obfuscation to the case that makes it harder to track down the people that are involved. It makes it harder to call witnesses. It makes it harder to try the case or to pin anybody down over it because you got to drag them all back to Vegas. All these guys were California dudes, and they're going to all have to be drugged back to Vegas. And if they don't want to go back to Vegas voluntarily, there's an iffy chance that they could be extradited. They may not have been able to extradite them because extradition laws are kind of tough between states. So, anybody who has any kind of knowledge of the criminal legal system knows that if you're going to pull something off and there's any chance that either anything goes wrong or anybody's going to get prosecuted for it, you want to make sure you do it in an area that's the toughest place to be accountable to. And a fight night in Vegas on that night is certainly one of those cases. You got to realize, at the time, Death Row Records was being investigated by the DEA. At that time, the police departments and the sheriff's departments were all looking at that. Dan Quayle, the vice president of the United States, was looking at Death Row Records. Laura Tucker was looking at Death Row Records. Everybody was looking at Death Row Records, and Death Row Records is in California. So I would guess that if you're going to do something and you're going to pick where you want to do it, it's not going to be where you live. There's an old saying about a dog doesn't shit in his own front yard. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
You don't do those things in the area that you might suffer the worst, or that they know you the most. So whatever the players were that were involved in the shooting itself, Vegas doesn't know who any of these players are. They don't have a clue. That's why they had to get Compton PD, or at least listen to Compton PD, because they didn't even know who Orlando Anderson was.
Wow.
So why not? I mean, if you're David Kenner, or you're a person that's a good legal strategist.
What's his name again? David what? Tenor.
And then Kenner. David Kenner was part owner of Death Row Records, which Suge Knight helped him start it with Ario's money. And he was a criminal attorney. He was a mob criminal attorney that was arguably, next to Johnny Cochran and them, one of the best criminal attorneys in the entire LA area.
Is he still around?
Oh, yeah, he's still around, yeah. In fact, he showed up when Suge got arrested this last time for the truck thing. David Kenner just showed up out of the blue. And Suge was so upset with it, he fired David Kenner right on the spot. David Kenner said he was going to be his attorney. He just volunteered. And Suge said, hell no. And David Kenner went packing. But David Kenner made a stop by the DA's office on his way out, and they had a closed-door meeting with the judge. When they came out of that meeting with the judge, David Kenner left and rode off into the sunset, and that's when they issued the gag order on Suge and said that Suge couldn't have any contact with anybody that wasn't his attorney. No family, no friends, nothing. Can't talk to anybody. That was right after David Kenner left that room.
Wow.
Because that's the whole MO. Either you're going to kill the guy or you're going to put him so far down the hole he can't talk to anybody. And if he does talk to somebody, his credibility is going to be so fucked up that they're not going to be able to ever get anything worth any testimony from this guy because his word is worthless.
Wow. So much depth into all of this. But if you were, and I know that you pretty much said everything regarding Tupac's who killed Tupac, but if you were to pinpoint it, I mean, because I think what fans are missing is that a few weeks ago they started saying that Diddy has something to do with it. How do you feel about that, for example?
Well, that's a whole other line of conversation. Let me try to put this as succinctly as I can. First off, I don't think Diddy had anything to do with it. Second off, that's not news. That's no new information. Diddy, Puffy, whatever you want to call him, and Biggie, their involvement with the Southside Crips goes all the way back to 1996. The only reason it's news now is because anybody that's under 30 years old has never heard the old theories before. Okay? So this is all news. Everybody's hearing it, waking up going, oh, God, Diddy? Wow, Diddy's a celebrity. He's not well liked by some people, so he's an easy target to go out and hit. Okay? But what you also have to realize is you got to look at the people that are putting that out there. Okay? The people that are putting that out there, and I want you to think about this for a minute. The murder rap investigation was started, give or take, about 2006. Break dating was let off the case in 2011, give or take. Maybe in 2010, but it was about 5 years that investigation took place, okay? If somebody's getting paid, let's say $125,000 a year over 5 years, my math might be a little shady, but that's about $575,000 per cop. And there were several people on this task force, so it's an easy thing to say that over a 5-year period, millions of taxpayer dollars were spent for an investigation that was a failed investigation. They failed. Why did they fail? Because they never got anywhere. And they can rationalize it as much as they want to. His own boss, Break Dating's old supervisor, who broke up and disbanded the task force, he was quoted in the LA Times as saying, we thought we could go someplace and we tried a couple of things, but at the end we never got anywhere. And the things that maybe we hoped would pan out wouldn't pan out. And he disbanded the case. So it was a failure. What else do you call a bunch of cops and investigators getting together and they can't close the case? They can't solve the case. They can't bring it to a prosecutor. It's a failure. And he can blame whoever he wants to for the failure. That's like quitting the game in the third quarter. You'll lose the game. You lose the game anyway because even though you're not playing, the game is still lost. So murder rap was a failed investigation. I don't know, I can't see for the life of me how anybody takes this dude credibly because he's running around spouting theories that even his own police department wouldn't back. And that includes the Diddy did it theory. I mean, if you watch the murder rap documentary, you actually look at it, how many other cops, he had Cooper, who was one of the initial Biggie investigators on it, but how many other cops that worked on that task force were on that video? Okay? Do you remember? Yeah. Did you see murder rap?
I have not seen it, but you tell me, how many were there?
What? None. He had Cooper, who was the original Biggie investigator on it, but out of his murder rap task force, no one, not one of the cops, not Tim Brennan, not Bobby Ladd, nobody else that supported the whole Orlando Anderson theory, not one single other cop that was with him on that murder rap investigation was interviewed on camera. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, when Frank and I had heard about murder rap and I read the book and I saw the things, I wasn't really all that impressed. But when he said he was going to do a movie about it, I actually thought, well, you know what, this is really going to be interesting because he's a cop, he knows a bunch of cops, he worked on a task force, he has a bunch of friends that are cops. You know, basically, if it were me, man, I'd have that documentary just wall-to-wall cops. And you know, they could bring the whole house down because how am I going to argue with a lineup of 16 cops all saying the same thing? Who's R.J. Bond? Okay? But yet, you watch the documentary, and other than Cooper, who was, like I said, he was the first Biggie investigator before Russ Poole took over, and actually did less than even Russ Poole did. There's nobody. It's just Greg Kading talking the whole time himself. He's the Lone Ranger. And if you have that many people that in your book you say supported what you did and helped you catch these bad guys and helped you do the proper deal with TPD and all that kind of stuff, I'm sorry, where are they? Because, there was just a TV show 2 nights ago, Vanity Fair, where Bobby Ladd and Tim Brennan were interviewed along with Greg Kading, but somehow they interviewed for that documentary. I wonder how come they didn't interview for their buddy Greg Kading.
Wow. So if you were to simplify all of this information that you just gave us, which is a lot, and it's backed up by facts, but no. We need to hear all of this because I think some people get lost in a lot of the details, and they need to hear all the information so they can dissect it. But if we were to simplify it, and I know whatever you say, people are going to dispute it regardless. It's just that's the nature of the world. But if you were to simplify it, who's responsible? Maybe not the shooter, maybe not the actual gun, but who's responsible for Tupac's death? If you were to put it into one name.
Well, it wouldn't be just one name, and I want to make that real clear. We do not believe, and this was brought up by Kading just recently in an argument with Michael Carlin online, which is fun to look up and listen to. Greg Kading said, "Oh, you have this vast conspiracy with 1,000 players, and everybody's guilty, and all the cops are involved, and all the FBI is involved, and it's this big conspiracy." That's not true. There are a few people who, because they had a lot of connections, gained a system that was apathetic. Because at the end of the day, the prosecutor's office, the FBI, they don't care about Tupac Shakur. Not really. They don't really care about Biggie Smalls. Yes, they were celebrities, but they were rappers, and Tupac had already shot at cops. So there's not going to be this whole long conga line of cops that want to investigate what happened with Tupac Shakur. There's just no motivation there because they think that Tupac was shot shooting at cops. He was a troublemaker, okay? And anybody in that rap lifestyle were troublemakers. I can't change that. But ultimately, the people that conspired to take out Suge Knight did know that, and they knew who was sleeping, and they just knew how to game the system, and it was only a few people. The book Tupac 187 puts out that the people that had the greatest motive for wanting to kill Suge Knight and wanted to take out Tupac if they could were Reggie Wright Jr., who was the head of security for Death Row, Sharitha Knight, who was Suge Knight's wife at the time, who actually owned half of Death Row Records and actually had an interest management-wise in Snoop Dogg, and David Kenner, who was his Suge Knight's partner in Death Row Records and was a mob lawyer. That those 3 people knew, because of their contacts, knew how to game the system and took advantage of a lot of people that were either asleep or just didn't care. And they all had motive. Murder equals means, motive, and opportunity. And if you were going to look at the CEO of any other major corporation, wouldn't you immediately go to the wife as your first person of interest because they have the greatest financial interest in it?
Wow.
You see what I mean? And yet her name is never mentioned. And I remember Russ Poole talking about it when she was interviewed, or he had to break the news to her that Kevin Gaines, who was the LAPD officer she was dating, and
whoa, really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
When Kevin Gaines was killed, he was shot by Frank Liga. He was killed in Sharitha Knight's car.
Oh, wow.
Sharitha Knight was dating Kevin Gaines. They were practically living together. And Sharitha Knight's registration was on the car. In fact, it was funny. After 2 days after Kevin Gaines got killed in that car, Russ Poole was really pissed off because Sharitha was already calling, trying to get her car back out of impound because they were still trying to investigate it for clues. But she pulled a few strings within the LAPD. Derwin Henderson is the guy's name that she finally got to do it. He got her car back for her, and she got her car back. But yeah, absolutely. There was no love lost between Sharitha Knight and Suge. Yeah, they were legally married, but she was off doing her own thing, and Suge Knight had threatened Kevin Gaines on multiple occasions. So when you look at somebody who is the CEO's wife, who's having an affair on the CEO, and the CEO gets shot at, and there's an attempted murder under weird circumstances, you watch any episode of CSI, go pick one.
Oh my God, this is.
Hey, look at.
This is just wild. This is more than a movie. This is crazy.
Well, they say truth is stranger than fiction, so call it what it is. But see, that's the thing. I mean, when you take away the whole Tupac side of it, you look at Suge Knight, and you look at the guy and say, okay, who would have had a reason to want to take Suge Knight out? Okay, what reason would they have? What's their motive? And you look at him, as in like Bill Gates or the head of any particular major corporation. Again, just like Las Vegas police told me that if you look at it that way, then you start going, well, who would they normally look at first? Well, they look at the wife. Okay, what was the character of the wife? Well, she was having an affair on him, and she was dating a corrupt LAPD cop, and, there was no love lost between the two of them. Maybe she has motive. She gets all of Death Row Records, which I think at the time was worth about $500 million, give or take. Okay?
Wow.
So you look at her, and then you look at somebody else, like a Reggie Wright Jr., you say, does he have motive? Well, he made it very clear on many times. He made it clear that he wanted to run the record label. And he said in a couple of different interviews that if given the opportunity, he'd have run Death Row Records a lot better than Suge Knight ever did. That he was actually better at Suge Knight of running a record label. And of course, what happened after Suge Knight was thrown in prison? Who took over the record label? Reggie Wright.
Wow.
Took over the record label. Okay? So you look at him. You look at David Kenner. David Kenner, does he have motive? Well, he's a part owner in the company, in the Death Row Records company. He is an acquaintance of a drug dealer, Harry O, who had money invested. Harry O hadn't got paid back yet. David Kenner has other clients and other things to protect. He made a lot of money off of Death Row Records, and Tupac had fired David Kenner, so David Kenner wasn't going to be able to represent him or be his agent anymore as far as Tupac's recordings went. So maybe it was time for him to get out. So you look at all these people and you say, okay, and as I always have in my movies, let you be the judge. You look at who's got motive here. And 187 was no different. You look at who's got motive, who's got the most motive, what their behaviors or what their actions were at the time, and what would lead them to want to do something like that. Okay? And of course, now what are they going to say 20 years later? No, I didn't. Of course. But at the same time, you still have to break the investigation down that way. And so far, I haven't heard from the other side of the camp any reason to doubt those motives or to somehow disprove them. Their defense is, nah. That's their defense. Nah. These people had motives. Nah. So until we hear that, that's what I'm putting out there. I'm putting out there that the people that had the greatest motive and opportunity, means, motive, and opportunity, that's what you build a murder case on. And those three people had means, motive, and opportunity to get at Suge Knight.
Wow. Let me ask you something regarding all of this. It's kind of separate but included. Aren't you afraid for your own self? For your life. I mean, look at anybody that's been involved. Frank Alexander, Russell Poole. These weird deaths Are you afraid?
Well, I'll take it one step further. Reggie Wright Jr. came out in an interview with bombfirst.com on YouTube right after Russell Poole. In fact, it was the day Russell Poole died. And he said, I ain't wishing no ill will on nobody, but I bet R.J. Bond's the next one to go.
Wow.
Okay? When you put it out there like that, the LAPD Threat Assessment Unit has been out to my house twice. Okay? Over this. I do talk with the LAPD periodically about it, and yes, I have concerns for my family's safety. But at the end of the day, getting rid of me really doesn't do anything, because I make my messages pretty clear and I put it out there pretty clear.
Well, what's your evidence? I mean, if something does happen, because you hold a lot of evidence that can really put, shed light and put a lot of people away. How are you safeguarding all of this? Because, this is serious stuff. That's what I mean. Like, if it sounds like you don't have any fear, because you're obviously talking about it and you're pointing the finger where it needs to be pointed at. But how are you? Yeah, go ahead.
Here's how I feel about that. When it's my time to go, it's my time to go. God has already preordained that, how that's going to happen. So there's really not much I can do about it. There's that old saying about worrying about things you can't do anything about. My information has been out there for 10 years now. Okay? It's not, Reggie Wright's name isn't a new name that's come out, just recently. It's been out there for 10 years. And he kept threatening he was going to sue me and da-da-da-da. And you know what? It's never happened. But, these guys work in the shadows. First thing I do is I stay out of Compton. Okay? I stay out of areas where, you don't go if you don't want to have somebody drive by and shoot at you. Okay? You try to stay out of that. I keep my family safe. We do what we can to keep our, security on a heightened state of readiness. But at the end of the day, the best thing I can do, I have a blog called Tupac187.blogspot.com, where I actually do post up evidence. I post up documents. I post up, deep dives into discussions that people want to know, where I write big, long articles about different aspects, like Robert Soria, the confession letter. I go in the whole idea of demo stealing and people, Pac fans, have such a big thing against. I go into that on the blog. So in my mind, getting that information out into the public is the best thing that I can do. I work with certain websites that I get the information through that they put out. J-Mix over at, I think it's Tupac Nation over there. He has his own YouTube channel. I give him documents and he's able to put them out he makes videos out of them. So really keeping the public apprised of the information as I get it really does help that. And, we have backups and we have, security measures that we do with the data that we have to make sure that if anything ever happened to me, of course, Michael Carlin's got everything that I have. There's other people that have copies of everything I've got. We make sure that we follow particular protocols to make sure that not only that we're safe, but that in the event there's something going on, that the information survives. So we take good care of that.
Okay, and then lastly, how do we move forward? As fans, as people, even just people looking for justice. What are the next steps? Because it seems that a lot of the information, nothing happens. It's out there and people know about it, but the people that should take action do not take action. Meaning, whether it be the police or whatever it may be. What are the next steps, in your opinion, to actually bring some resolution and not just information, but actual action on these open cases?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of different things that have to happen. The first thing that has to happen is we have to get the people that are basically either in charge of the investigations or have something to do with the investigation. We need to get them out from where they're sitting right now. We need to get them away from it. We need to get them gone from that case. Darren Dupree, when Russ Poole and I went to LAPD's Parker Center and met with the Deputy Chief of Police and several of the captains there in the Robbery Homicide Division, brought Darren Dupree with them. Darren Dupree is Greg Kading's old partner and is referred to pretty heavily in murder rap. Darren Dupree was in those meetings and was responsible for leaking the confession letter online. And he gave it to Greg Kading to leak. Greg Kading just admitted that the other day. Now, according to the LAPD, Darren Dupree is their person that's handling the Biggie and Tupac case. Okay, when I say handling, that's kind of an odd word because, according to Greg Kading, he and Darren Dupree already got it all figured out. So what kind of investigation are you going to do if you already think you figured it out? You're not going to do any. So, and if I give you a clue that says that Elmer Fudd had something to do with it or Oprah had something to do with the murders, you're not even going to look at it because you already think you got to figure it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense, doesn't it?
Makes sense.
Human nature. Yeah, it's human nature. You know, I already got to figure it out. Why do I need you to complicate things? It's easy to laugh off. It's easy to blow off because you think you already figured it out. So until those people, you know, they say your mind's like a parachute. It only works when it's open. You know, if these people, like a Darren Dupree, or like some people at the county prosecutor's office that need to be just gone from the prosecutor's office, when they get a crew of people that are objective or understand that maybe there's one more facet to this case that meets the eye, maybe it's not quite so locked up as people would like to think it is, that's when you'll start to see traction. The second thing that you have to see to make this case move forward is that people need to be more responsible than just what they get spoon-fed. I mean, we're raising a whole generation of knuckleheads, you know, because what I see is viral. Somebody puts something online that's incorrect, and then 19,000 other websites pick it up, and it's the exact same article. Well, if the information in that article is flawed to begin with, within a day, 19,000 websites are publishing flawed information, and everybody's running around just accepting it like it's gospel. Okay? Suge Knight said it the best when he was interviewed by TMZ. He said, Tupac fans need to be asking questions. You need to do it like what you just did with me. You ask questions. You don't accept the okie doke from somebody that claims that he solved the case when they didn't solve anything. Okay? They quit the case. They left. They quit. They abandoned ship. Okay? It's not a successful voyage to New York if you bail out halfway across the ocean. So you've got to ask questions of the fan. You've got to look at the information that's out there. And here's the biggest part. I want to pass this on. If you're going to really be serious about wanting to get to the bottom of what happened, you got to ride with the people that are helping you get the information you need. Greg Kading has not put forth a single relevant document to back anything that what he said. He hasn't released, you know, they did Murder Rap. They released little pieces of Keith Davis' recorded conversation, which wasn't even legally recorded to begin with. And he says some things, and they've cut it up, and they've edited it up, but they don't show any documents. And what's worse is after Murder Rap came out, Greg Kading was supposed to be shitting on, as he claims, every document known in the investigation. Why aren't you putting that stuff out? If that's what you believe, put out the documents to support what you believe. Let people look at it for themselves. If you go to tupac187.blogspot.com, you see letters, you see police documents, you see information. When I bring up a subject, I just don't bring it up. I give you some basis or document that backs it up, or a witness interview that backs it up. And I'm not just talking about some nameless Crip gangbanger out in, you know, off of 142nd Street. I'm talking about people that have actual names and good reputations, people that put information out. That's what you have to, as a viewer, as a listener, as a web subscriber, as a fan of Tupac and or Biggie, because the same thing applies. You have to be the one to say, show me what is behind this. Okay? Corey Edwards, who was Orlando Anderson's companion or compatriot or friend or buddy or whatever you want to call it, he said to the Las Vegas police that after the Orlando Anderson beating, Orlando Anderson went to the bar with them Okay? Darnell Brim, head of the Crips, said that Keefe D was a perpetual liar and just like to break things up and make a big scene out of things. Well, we put those statements out there. We put those comments out there that those people made. You know, we don't just say they said that. We put the documents out there where they actually said it. So you can read it for yourself.
Wow.
Just don't accept what somebody tells you because they say, I'm the voice of authority. I'm a former cop. I'm a do-do-do-do-do-do. Who cares? Oh, R.J. Bond, you're not a cop. You couldn't possibly know more than I do about an investigation. Oh, really? You know, I guess Woodward and Bernstein, the guys who raided the Watergate Hotel, they weren't cops. They brought down the whole Nixon regime, and they weren't cops. They were investigative reporters. They weren't cops.
Wow.
Nixon had to resign over that whole thing. He wasn't brought down by cops. He was brought down by Joe Normals like you or me. Just people seeking to get to the truth of something.
And speaking really quickly about that, I've noticed Bernard Parks' name mentioned a few times in different places. What's the deal with him?
Well, Bernard Parks right now he's actually on the Los Angeles Police Department's what they call the Police Commission, and that's the oversight board that is responsible for overseeing the conduct of the chief of police of the city of Los Angeles. And Bernard Parks was a former chief of police that Russ Poole was at odds with over the entire Rampart scandal, and they took Russ off the Big E case because he believed that there were LAPD cops involved. They took him off that case, and then he sued Bernard Parks, and of course the Wallace family sued Bernard Parks because he was chief of police. Wallace got killed, and Bernard Parks, has been very deeply involved in all this. One thing that we also found out was that Bernard Parks' daughter had been busted for some drug offense in Las Vegas. And so the story is that there was some sort of a deal made between LAPD and Las Vegas with Bernard Parks' daughter that, they just kind of give a one-off to help each other out. And a lot of people think that that's why Bernard Parks didn't want Russ Poole investigating anything having to do with Tupac because it led back to Las Vegas. So, Again, that's more on the speculation side of things. I do know that that has been put out in the press in terms of Bernard Parks' daughter. I don't know about as much of it as I think I should because it's kind of a peripheral thing. But I do know that his daughter was definitely picked up, for some drug-related offense in Las Vegas.
Wow. And what about the family of Tupac? How come they haven't brought out any kind of lawsuit or something against the LAPD or even the Las Vegas police?
Well, you see how well it went for Christopher Wallace's family. I mean, it didn't go well for them because you're fighting such an incredibly big machine. I mean, when you think about it, Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles. Well, actually, you know what? I have two thoughts about that. Number one, the city of Los Angeles has on staff hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of attorneys that basically they're already paid. So unlike Valletta Wallace, who has to pay all these different attorneys, let's say she's got 5 of them, she's paying an average of $500 an hour for their time. So she's spending $2,500 an hour when they're all standing there in court, and she's paying $2,500 an hour. It doesn't cost the city of Los Angeles a dime. They're already put those people on salary. And all those attorneys are there, and the city of Los Angeles can gear up 100 attorneys to fight Valletta Wallace and the 5 attorneys that she's got. So they already have people there ready to fight. And all they got to do is just say, okay, today you're going to stop working on this, and you're going to work over here on the Wallace case. You got the LAPD who was running around. They weren't being honest. They were hiding things in desk drawers and hiding documents and hiding tapes, and they were purging the murder books. They weren't being honest. They were in full cover-up mode at the time. The Wallace case just didn't go well for a number of reasons. Not all of them were Wallace's, but attorney's fault. You can't fault somebody if they're hiding documents on you. But at the same time, it just didn't go well. So I think that Afeni probably sat back and laid in the cut and watched what was going on. And I guarantee you that if Wallace had won, she'd have been right behind him. Okay? But I honestly think that Afeni is cut a little bit differently than Voletta. Different people deal with death in different ways. Afeni, was with the Black Panthers. And there were a lot of, I will say, good people, but there were people with good intent that died as Black Panthers and are in prison for the rest of their lives. So she is probably more adapted to loss and death and losing people that are close to her. So maybe she just wants to get on with her life and, move forward. So, I don't fault either one of them for how they are and what they want and whether or not they seek justice or revenge or whatever you want to call it. But I do think that as two different women, the only thing they had in common was that they both lost their son. Other than that, they don't have anything in common.
All right, that's a fair assessment. So, as fans, what about the Department of Justice? Taking this to a federal level, since it did cross state lines in a way, the investigation. Have you attempted to do that, or what's the deal with that? With taking this to a higher justice system?
Well, there's a couple of rungs that you can go within the justice system. For example, we had, up until the latest thing with Shug, we had approached Dave Demersion. We'd approached a couple of different people at the prosecutor's office about it, because a prosecutor has the ability to convene what's called a grand jury, and they do it all the time. And a grand jury is empowered to issue subpoenas. They can tell cops what to do. They can hire their own investigators. They can do anything they want to do to try to get down to the bottom of a problem, okay? And so you have to ask yourself why the district attorney's office has never done that in either case. Why they've never done that. If it's so easy to do, why haven't they done it? So that's the first rung of it, so they're not interested in doing anything. The next rung up is actually the California Attorney General's office. The Attorney General for the state of California and the California Department of Justice are the ones that kind of manage and regulate all of the police departments in the state of California. So there is a possibility of going to them. And I'm going to put a pin in that and say that the same thing is true over in Las Vegas. You have that kind of same rungs of a ladder that you can go up, even before you get to the FBI or the Department of Justice. Okay? There's still rungs there. Now, so why haven't we? Or why has no one, or why hasn't that been tried? It's almost like an appeal when you lose a case. There's a I think they said it's something like an 80% chance if you lose the initial case, or your case is kind of a dog case, that if you lose the original case, there's like an 80% chance you're going to lose it on appeal. If you appeal it, there's a very slim chance they're going to overturn it, because judges, cops, prosecutors, people in the legal system, really, they kind of take the safe bet and they say, well, we're not really going to go argue with these judges down below us, and we're not going to argue with other police departments, because what would that be like if none of the cops trusted the other cops? It would be anarchy. We'd never be able to get anything done. That's kind of the standard argument they give. So, and that's not an excuse. That's just the way they look at things. So the higher up you go with your complaint, the more of your shit you have to have together, if I may be so bold and sorry for the swearing. But that's really what you have to do. You have to have your proverbial act together and present a whole case, because what you're doing is you're saying, hey, all of these other police departments didn't refer this to you. All of these other police departments, nobody else investigated this, but you should, because of all of these things. And the first thing they're going to do is you're starting with the sentence that nobody else wants it. Okay? And who wants to be the ugly broad at 2:30 in the morning? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a big hurdle. Now, having said that, and that's like I said before, you can go to the FBI, and the FBI is kind of its own standard like that. They say, well, let's look at what's been done in the investigation. Well, you got this one retired cop running around saying it's one thing, and he's a retired cop, and then the rest of the LAPD, they really haven't done anything about it. Vegas hasn't done anything about it. They're still looking to see if they can find the murder weapon. They'd love to see the murder weapon, but short of that, they're not going to do anything. Oh, okay, this case doesn't have a murder weapon. Okay, great. So they look at it and they say, well, what's our likelihood of succeeding on this? And all the information's there, but if they can't really prosecute or bring someone to trial about it, they're not going to touch it. They're going to be like, well, that's great information, but at the end of the day, unless you're going to tell me that there is somebody there, you're going to show me how we can go get him and then prosecute him, the likelihood of them accepting is pretty slim.
And do you have that information?
Well, that's what we're kind of working on right now. There's what they call a package, and what you do is basically you give a condensed version. It's like a bullet point, like 40 different bullet points. And you take that and you break it down into like the hard facts. Boom, 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 boom. And it's maybe 3 or 4 pages long, so it's not like they got to read a book, okay? And but you have to. It's kind of an art form, something you want to go over 100 times because you only have one shot at making it right. So you want to make sure that you have all the information you can. Everything makes sense, and that whatever they're reading in that 4 pages is going to knock them off their spot. Okay? You can't go in there with a maybe. You can't go in there with an I think. You almost just have to know it's stone cold. I think that's probably the hardest part of what we're doing right now is putting that together. To get that put across, and that's obviously what we want to do. So that's kind of where we're working on it right now. New leads come in every day, and we try to process that. But it is an onward battle, and it's not uphill. It's just tedious because there are so many things in your way to try to get this thing prosecuted.
So it sounds like there's a lot of work to do, but it's not impossible. What about if there's like a big movement of people in California, let's say, or Los Angeles that want the police to take action on the case? Even some of these groups like the Black Lives Matter, because obviously both Biggie and Tupac were black. So these are cases that have never been resolved. What if there's like an overwhelming push from a lot of people? Do you think that might loosen up some of the things?
Well, I think that anytime there's a consensus of people willing to discuss a topic, I would certainly hope that the people that represent us as a government would be willing to listen to that. The Occupy movement, since you mentioned that, kind of a funny thing, because for all those Occupy, sit downs or stand ups or whatever, I didn't see anything get accomplished. Did you?
No, not on that. But like the Black Lives Matter. I mean,
Sure.
Regardless of the politics of it and whether it's right or wrong, they're bringing a lot of issues into the political mainstream. Where they're interrupting these Trump rallies and doing all of these.
I think you're right. I think that there could be. I really do. I believe in the power of the people. Okay. I actually understand. I don't necessarily agree with their tactics, but I understand even back when the Black Panthers were doing what they're doing, why they did what they did. Like I said, I don't always agree with their tactics, how they executed it, but I certainly understand the reason behind it. Now, I think that if the right people, in terms of people who would want this or would be loud vocal voices, I think if they brought it as a group to the right people, and that's probably the $64,000 question. Who are the right people to bring it to? If they did that in support of something that made sense, then yeah, I think that I have to believe that the people would listen to it. R.J. Bond running around the voice of the wilderness. He's easy to kind of knock out by like a guy by Greg Gading as a lunatic, or a Michael Carlin as a lunatic, because they're the only ones that, have that information or believe what they believe. If you get 1,000 people who believe the same thing together and they rally, there's a lot that gets done. Okay? So what we have to do, I think, is as a group, as fans, is we got to stop with the bickering of it's either one or the other. It's either Orlando Anderson or it's Death Row. And you got to look at where the published, documented information takes you, and then make a voice, and then demand what it is. Because at the end of the day, the politicians are just going to say, well, what do you want us to do? Oh, okay, well, we'll act. What do you want us to do? How do you want us to act? What do you want us to do? Okay. And then the response has to be certain. You have to know what it is you want them to do.
Okay, well, it sounds like, look, have you heard of, change.org, where you could put a petition? I believe, well, I think it's time that you make one, you and Michael, and I'm dying. Now that I'm getting all this information, I want to have a conversation with everybody involved, even if there's different views on what happened. But I think everybody has the same goal to get to the bottom of it. But if you start a petition where you outline all this information that you have, like you said, bullet points, hard evidence, and then we try, to get people to join behind you and Michael and everybody that's involved in the investigations and cops, maybe even we could even go as far as getting Tupac's mother to endorse what you're trying to do. I think if you get that kind of movement, you really, really probably could get a lot more done, because it's easy to point you out and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about because you're not a cop, you're not this. But I think if a lot of people get behind that, even if it's just wanting answers, even if your petition is you want this case to be solved, or whatever the petition may be, then a lot more can get done, especially, politicians like to pander to whatever the majority wants. So if the majority of people wants resolution and justice, they're going to have to put pressure, or maybe this could even be moved up the ladder a lot quicker, whether it be the FBI or whatever other means. What do you think? Would you be willing to start a petition online?
I will. One of the things that I want to do before I do that, and I have the fans, I've got their backs on being willing to do that. One of the things that I would like to do, there's a little bit more investigating that Michael and I are doing right now that I would really like to kind of conclude, because if we're right about the things that we're looking into right now, it could be a real game changer. And it's exciting, it's scary, it's a lot of things. But yeah, my commitment, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, I would do that.
Okay, because I think a lot of people want to get behind you, and there's not that one way of getting it done. And I think doing it really as formally as possible, it will help the entire thing, and as well as protect you as well. Because if you are starting this kind of movement and you're activating people to take action, then you're going to be looked at differently, where, something happens to you, God forbid, there's a big reason, rather than just, whatever they may want to say happen.
I take the matter deeply personally. I mean, I've lost two, one best friend and one very good friend. I've lost both of them in the last couple of years. Wow. And over what I believe is over this or related to this. And unfortunately, that takes on a whole different dynamic. For a while, I was kind of laissez-faire about it. I thought, well, after I put out the book, I kind of said what I had to say about things. I figured that would be done. At least that's what I told my wife. I told her I was done. Okay, I said everything I have to say now. I'm done. And then, of course, the minute that happens, they make a liar out of you, because new stuff comes rolling in, or somebody points something out, like they think they see Reggie Wright Sr. at the MGM casino with Orlando Anderson in the MGM surveillance tape. I've looked at that thing 100 times, and I never thought, really? And then I looked at it, and I looked at the picture they're comparing it to. I'm like, damn, maybe it is. And that's not the big news that I'm talking about. That's just an example.
Wow.
And coming back. I mean, we get leads from fans every day. And the funny thing about it is, it's because we haven't closed our minds to what's possible. If we went in and said, we already figured it out, where are you going to go from there? You know,
Wow.
That's back to that whole, you know, we haven't figured it out. It's a very arrogant thing to say that it's over before it's over, because I think that's what the song said. It ain't over till it's over.
Wow, yeah, that's exactly what it says. So if we wanted to give you clues, if we wanted to send information your way, maybe even people that really know what happened, that wanted to contact you, where do we find you online, or your social media, blog, all of that?
Telling you, my main hangout, I used to hang out on a couple of chat boards. The problem is there's a lot of trolls on the chat boards, and it becomes, you spend a lot of time giving a lot of information out, and then they just blow you off, and so it becomes a very frustrating experience. What I've done is I created a blog. The blog is called Tupac187.blogspot.com. And Tupac187.blogspot.com. I'm posting there all the time. It's 2 or 3 times a week now. I'm trying to up it a little bit, keep posting new things. But every time we do an interview, every time one of us is online, anytime we have new information, or even, I mean, more importantly, when we just want to clear some shit up, to get some, you know, to get down to it and say, okay, let's clear the mystery here. Let's just get down to it. That's the place where we do it. So, and there are people who respond back. You can always respond back. And if there's things you need to send us, or things you need to communicate, that's the place you can do it. That's where everybody goes to talk about what it is that we believe and why we believe it is.
Okay, and if you were able to have a conversation, for example, with Greg Kading, would you be willing to meet up and you and Michael and maybe try to come to a resolution or some kind of compromise to work together? Are you open to that?
No, not really. I mean, you know, and I don't say that to be difficult, but here's the deal. Number one, are you ever going to have a conversation with somebody who already thinks he figured it out? Okay. First off, I mean, that was what I was saying about, you know, getting Darren Dupree out of the way. You know, all he's going to do is defend, because that's all he's got. He's baited himself into a corner, and like a, you know, caged Wolverine, or like a dog that's, you know, panicked in the corner, they just lash out. And what I've seen from Mr. Kading, unfortunately, is his personal attacks against everybody. He doesn't attack the information. He gets sarcastic. He gets caustic. He attacks you personally. You know, and it's just not healthy, because he doesn't present any evidence to support his position other than what he's repeated 100 times, but he also doesn't present any information to refute your information. So it's really kind of a waste of time. That's one reason. The second reason that I don't want to really get in with Greg Kading and have a big debate is because he's a failure. He led a fight. You know, the taxpayers paid LAPD hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars to try to figure out what was going on with the Biggie Smalls case. They didn't even ask him to look at Tupac. He went off and did that on his own. But they just wanted to know the answers about the Biggie case. And at the end of the day, they couldn't come up with anything. They had a theory, but they didn't have anything that could back their theory. They had just as much as I do or anybody else does about it. But the difference between me and them is that they were a task force who had a full-time job to do nothing but that. That's all they had to do that one thing. And they could not, at the expense of millions of dollars. They had search warrants, they had subpoenas, they had the power of the courts. They had everything in their hands to affect an investigation. And at the end of the day, the scoreboard shows murder rap 0. They failed. He failed. And unless he can prove how he was successful in bringing somebody to prosecution, or how he could have brought somebody to prosecution, which he can't, because he says even he admits that he needed other information that he couldn't get because he's blaming that somebody died. Okay, but that's his only way of getting more information. I'm not interested in talking to failures. I'm interested in pushing this case forward. I'm not interested in talking to people who failed, who had every opportunity in the world for 5 years to do something right. He couldn't do it. he couldn't pull it off. He had the federal government assisting him and everything, and he still couldn't pull it off. Why the hell would I want to debate with that dude?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think you made it clear. You made it quite clear. And but I'm glad we know where to find you. Anybody that has any information that's listening to this, you know, there might be people out there that their conscience is getting to them. You know, it's been a long time, and some people may know things. And obviously, the culture, obviously in the street, is never ever to snitch.
Yeah, I can tell you this. Russ Poole said he truly believed that this case wouldn't really break until there was some sort of a deathbed confession. Because that's what he said. He said that he really thought that there would be a major breakthrough in this case when somebody was just so overwhelmed with guilt and they knew they didn't have much time left, that they would actually, you know, spill their guts in a deathbed confession. And he said that police weren't going to be the ones to solve this case. It was going to be the public or the media that would solve it. So, you know, God bless Russ Poole and rest in peace.
Wow. And do you believe Russ Poole, do you think that he was killed?
I know Michael believes that. I know that the circumstances surrounding his death are extremely questionable, and I think it's possible. I still have a little bit more in my mind to get past, and I don't argue with Michael about it because Michael has a little more information about it than I do. And we have circled around a little bit to kind of sync up about that, but Michael was much more involved with Russ during those last days that he was alive than I was, because I was actually off doing my own thing. So to answer your question, and I'm not trying to avoid it, but to answer it, I think it's extremely possible that there could have been foul play involved. It's clear that what Russ expected to happen and when he got there and what happened were two completely different things. And based on what we know about the people that he met with and the people that he was involved with, there's a lot of shadiness going on there. So to be continued.
Okay. And do you think Frank Alexander committed suicide?
Frank Alexander was my closest friend. We knew each other, like I said, it would have been going on 20 years. And Frank was the godfather to my child. We talked every single day on the phone, sometimes for hours at a time. I was in his office downstairs where he shot himself, or where he was alleged to have shot himself in the head. I was at his house 12 hours after he pulled the trigger. I was at his house. And I was standing in the room that he is supposed to have shot himself in. And I did not see a single bit of evidence that anybody did anything in that room. It just looked like Frank wasn't there. And I've been in that office 100 times. So I called the Marietta Police Department. I went to the Marietta Police Department. I subpoenaed the Marietta Police Department. That's the city that he lived in, the police officers that investigated it. It's a closed case. It's not an open murder case, so there should be no reason why they wouldn't give me a copy of the police report. I filed a Freedom of Information Act about it. To this day, they still will not give me a copy of that police report.
Wow.
So I genuinely do not know, and it is an open sore for me. It's something I think about every day. It hurts me every single day because I feel in so many ways I don't have closure in that. And I won't have closure in it until I see how my friend, who is an expert in handling firearms, Marine Corps veteran, bodyguard, carried 2 firearms on him every day under, concealed carry permit, that this guy just picked up a gun randomly and shot himself in the head point blank with a 45, and yet I walked into that room 12 hours after he pulled the trigger, and there's not a blood stain, there's not a splatter mark, there's no brain matter on the walls, there's no brain matter on the ceiling, there is nothing. And I asked his wife about it, and his wife said Oh, well, the cleaning crew came in and cleaned it up. I said, what? He shot himself at 5 o'clock at night. What cleaning crew do you know that shows up to clean up a murder scene after 5 o'clock at night? I'm a suicide. I shouldn't say a murder. Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, but they cleaned it all up. I was there at 6 o'clock that morning. I take that back, probably 7 o'clock that next morning. And me and Kevin Hackey were both there on premises. We were the only ones that were there aside of Frank's immediate family. I saw the room myself, and there was not a single sign of anyone having shot anything there. And it certainly didn't jive up with what I was hearing. So, yeah, it bothers me a lot.
Wow. Well, hopefully we get to the bottom of that here too. And someone, it is gonna come down to someone just opening up and not caring what people think and just saying what happened. And whether it be that case or in any other of these cases. So, I really want to thank you, and I appreciate you being so candid and open, and you really answered the questions. You didn't beat around the bush, and I really, really appreciate that. I think the fans are going to appreciate that. They're going to see how transparent you are, and we're definitely going to keep following you, and we're going to keep updated through you with what's going on with these cases. We're going to wait on that petition from you or Michael, whoever needs to put it out. I'm sure that as soon as that goes up, there's a lot of people that are going to get behind it, and we're ready to get some resolution in our lifetime, hopefully in our lifetime, not later. So thanks very much.
Yeah, God bless you, and God bless the fans. Tupac187.blogspot.com. Check it out, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Thank you, RJ. Appreciate it.